Hey everybody, it's me again. So, I was just talking about step 3. Now we're going to step 4. What I usually like to do is I like to try to get a visual on what I'm going to be doing with my fabric. So, this is a sketch that I drew. And this will not be what my quilt turns out to look like. I just wanted a rough idea of what I was going to be doing. And as you notice in the bottom, I did say change the pattern. And I'm probably going to change it again based on how much fabric I have when I'm done. But I wanted a rough idea of how many squares and how many triangles, because I'm going to do a pinwheel. And I need to know how many of each I'm going to need. So, but this was just to give me a rough idea. Next, I have some samples of some templates. I have not ironed my fabric yet, but we're going to pretend like I did for the sake of giving you all a few videos to get you started. I didn't want you to have to wait a few hours or even, a few days for me to get to the template and the cutting steps. So we're going to pretend like I've already ironed my fabric and skip ahead for the sake of a few videos. Now, depending on what size square you want to work with, depends on, or what you're doing with it, depends on what kind of template you want. I recommend for beginners that you start with a simple, basic square. Doesn't matter the size, but start with a square. They're easier to sew, they're easier to match the corners up, and that's just where you should begin. I'm getting into a lot of different shapes because I've been doing it so long. Now, if you can find a piece long enough, you can use that to go all the way across, and you're going to want to keep it away from the edge just a tiny bit, because sometimes the edges aren't even. And you're going to trace. I prefer to use a fat number 2 pencil. That's my number 1 go-to. Now, I will use chalk for dark fabrics when the number 2 pencil doesn't show up. Most people, especially if they're made of money, which I'm not, prefer to use fabric pencils. This is specially made for fabric, doesn't bleed, easy to wash off. I find this just as effective, a lot cheaper. You can get a big pack of them, or just 2 in a pack. And I just prefer the number 2 pencil. I can even go through and erase something on the fabric. But I will also use white, just standard white chalk for the dark fabrics when I can't see the pencil. Now, give me a second to put this away. And give me a second to put these away. And give me a second to take this. As I was saying with this, I'm going to say again, if you have it a long enough piece, you can go all the way across the fabric and just make your rows like this, all the way up, back to back. And then come in with a smaller square or a straight ruler and just go up the ruler at the measure the size out that you need, and just go up that and get all your lines in that way. But I'm going to take you to a very individual so you can see it very clearly. Now, you're going to line this up to the edge of your fabric like so. You're going to trace it all the way around just like that. I'm not going to do it until I iron my fabric, but I just wanted to give you a thing to see. I am going to draw one line right here because I want to make sure you understand what I'm doing. So we're going to pretend like I've traced an entire square, even though I haven't. We're going to take this and we're going to bring it over. And you see, that's the end of the square. I've traced an entire square. I'm going to bring this and match it up right there. Again, leaving an edge. Okay? And you're going to trace all along there. Again. And I'm going to actually trace this for a minute. Okay? And then you're going to come over again and keep going, okay? All the way across your fabric. When you get up top, you're going to stop and trace right there. You're going to line it up. This is the way you do not waste any fabric. You don't want to, trace it here and trace it there and trace it there. You'll lose a lot of your fabric that way. Now, I have done that when I wanted a specific cut. I buy butterfly fabric or birds, and I want those specific birds, and I want to make sure the tail's not cut off. Doesn't really matter when you're traditionally quilting, but sometimes if I have the spare money, I don't mind going that extra mile and wasting a bunch of fabric so I have the exact cut that I want. And remember, when you're doing exact cuts, you're going to want to leave enough of an edge, because you're going to sew into the square about 1/2 inch all the way around. So when you're done sewing, it's not going to be this big. You have to remember, leave enough room to sew down that way, because that's going to be tucked inside the next piece, and that much of it's coming off. And so when you're doing that, you're going to want to make your pieces, your templates, bigger than what you want your square to be when you're done sewing. So allow 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch all the way around it when you're doing your measurements and your mathematics. And so that's step 4 and step 5.